Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. I have my Lord have mercy mug today because Lord have mercy. It's a chaotic life right now. So today's video is going to be a book review on Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. So for those of you that don't know, Margaret Owen was the author for The Merciful Crow and the Faithless Hawk. That was a duology that she wrote previously, and I believe that was her debut novels, those two books. And this is her new standalone book that just came out in October. And I was lucky enough to be picked by Bookish First to receive a free copy of it, and I read it and, spoiler alert, really liked it. But just kind of wanted to give you my thoughts on this book and a little bit of a review. So first off, just like the book itself, the book is absolutely beautiful. This artwork is stunning. I really like the aesthetic of it and how like dark and beautiful it is. Very fairy tale-esque. Then you have the spine and the back. Looking at the naked hardcover is nothing special, but it does have a tiny little stamp and then gold foiling on the spine. So that in itself is really beautiful, but the story is a retelling of the Goose Girl. And I was not very familiar with that fairy tale at all going into this book, so I had really no idea what to expect out of that tale. It is a Germanic tale, so there's a lot of Germanic influence in this book, which I thought was really fun and interesting. I know a lot of fantasy and fairy tale retellings are more European, or at least the variety we have more widely available is more European based, but I still thought it was interesting because it was more Germanic in nature, which can be very dark, which I appreciate a lot. And so the retelling of the Goose Girl in a very short synopsis is basically that there was a maid who stole a princess's identity, and then she gets caught along the way and is, I think, killed depending on how the story ends. There's different endings to the story, but she's either killed or caught and punished, etc. What Margaret Owen did was she took the story of the villain or the maid and made it from her perspective of the story. I'm sorry, my puppy was being totally chill and now he's got a squeaky toy, so if you hear that, my apologies. Legend likes to make an entrance, as you know, so I really loved what Margaret Owen did and how she took the perspective of the villain of this story and made it her own. I thought this book was very well done. I think Margaret Owen tells the story very well. I will say that when I started this tale, I was kind of confused because you're thrown into it in the midst of the story, so you're not starting at the beginning. She kind of goes back and forth in these different ways that she tells it. So you're kind of just thrown into the lore and everything that's going on, and you're not really sure how it ties in. You're not really sure what the different gods are like, because on the front there are these like gods and they play a part in the tale. So you're kind of thrown into the gods and you're thrown into these different characters and you're trying to differentiate between the characters. I also listened to this on audiobook most of the time, so that could be why it was a little bit jarring and confusing for me at the start. So I was kind of thrown into it and scrambling to try to figure out what was what, who was who, and there's a lot of names thrown at you, and I was just playing catch up, I felt like, for the first good portion of the book. So it wasn't a slow start necessarily, but it just took me a while to get my bearings. And so that affected my reading a little bit. But then once the story gets going, it is pretty fast paced, but it's really interesting. There's always something going on that you're trying to figure out or that you're trying to understand. And so basically you follow this maid who is a thief and she stole the princess's identity, and she's thrown into these situations where she's just trying to steal enough that she can run away and have a life on her own. She's the daughter of Fortune and Death, so they play a part in this, and she's trying not to ask them for help because if she asks them for help, something will happen. So she's trying not to ask anyone for help, and she's trying to steal enough to run away and have her own life where she doesn't have to worry about any of these things anymore. But you're seeing like why she's justifying herself and the things that she did and like stealing the princess's identity and stealing all of these jewels, because she's in a position where she's now invited to royal parties, so she's trying to steal all of this stuff from the different royals to have her own life. And she gets caught by another god that then curses her. It's turning her body, parts of her body, and these jewels start popping up on her body, like literal like ruby on her face pops up, and then her trying to navigate that. And so she's being punished for her greed, and if she doesn't figure out how to solve this, she's going to turn into a pile of jewels. So you're seeing her navigating this, you're seeing her start to get caught for her actions and her thievery, and she's also betrothed to a man because she's supposed to be the princess. And he is horrible, and you're trying to figure out that underlying plot. So there's a lot going on in this story, and it was like I said, it was very well done. A lot of the characters you get really attached to or are really funny. And you also get to see a lot of the different dynamics of all of these different characters coming from these different positions, whether it's a maid, a princess, a person who's basically like a police officer-esque character with more magic, the royal families that she's involved with, and the servants. And you're getting to see all of that, plus some mythological creatures like kobolds, etc. You're getting to see all of those different dynamics and how they're playing out, and how each of the different characters has motivations and has reasons for the things that they're doing, and they have beliefs of right and wrong. And so all of that coming together in this story was really interesting to see, and I really liked how you're seeing the maid, who is considered the villain in this story, justifying her actions to the princess, justifying her actions to the police type character, and how they don't necessarily agree with her. Margaret Owen also does this thing where she has these stories splitting up the main story, and I will show you an example. So I'll show you the second tale, but it says the second tale, the white penny. And then it will go on for a couple of pages telling you that tale. And that tale has context to the overall story. So she's kind of showing you where you are in the story, but she's also backtracking and telling you these different tales of how we got to where we are and the reasons the characters think the way they do and act the way they do. And most of it is from the perspective of the maid Vanja. And so you're getting to see why she's saying, like, you need to apologize to me, you never wanted this, people treat servants like crap, you need to change your ways. You get to see her actions, but she's also not a good character. She's more morally gray and kind of justifying the ends justify the means type of a person. But it's cool to see her perspective, but also seeing her interact with the other characters and how they have these disagreements and these arguments, and how they have to learn to trust each other or not trust each other, and how sometimes your view of somebody's past can affect your view of their actions in the future, even if they were actually innocent in certain situations. And all of that coming together was so good. And I really like this book, and I feel like when I first finished it, I didn't like it as much as I do now, because it kind of like ruminated, and I thought more about the story, and I thought more about the dynamics of all the characters, and I think it's really well done. But I did rate it like 3 or 3.5 stars, so I wouldn't say it's like the best book I've ever read, but I did really enjoy it. I wanted to know how it was going to end. I wanted to know how this was all going to play out and how it was going to come together. There's times where you're so frustrated because the characters are like self-sabotaging, and there's times where you're just like, please just ask for help, or different scenarios are happening. And you want justice, and you want this character to do well, and you want this other character to do horribly. It was just a really fun ride, and I think if you're at all interested in this story and in these kind of dark Germanic fairy tales, I think you will really like this book. It has a little bit of like some found family stuff, but it's more so coming out of a place of conflict into more of understanding one another, which was really cool to see. There is a smidgen of romance. I would not say it's the main part of the story or the main plot, but it is in there, and it was very cute. I think I mentioned this before, but I loved all the different characters, and I loved how different each individual character was. I think she wrote all their personalities pretty well, and them interacting was really funny, really frustrating at times, really endearing at times. And I was already interested in Margaret Owen's other works, but now that I've read this, I am very excited to be able to get into those at some point, because I do have The Merciful Crow, and I was interested in the storyline, so now I'm intrigued to get to that. It's also really interesting that this is a standalone, because it's, you know, one and done. We don't get that often in fantasy. The chapter art is beautiful in this, the story art is beautiful, the story itself is pretty enrapturing, and I think overall this was just a very well done story. I think this is going to be one of those authors to watch to see what she continues to come out with, because I know that some people liked her first duology, and I'm curious to see what people think about this, but I think the more she writes, the more interesting it's going to become. So if you like dark fantasy retellings, if you like European or Germanic retellings about like the kobolds and different creatures like that, I think you'll really like this book. I know this is a very odd comparison, but I think if you loved the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Meyer, that you will like this book, because it does talk about more of the villain side of things and how not everyone is morally upstanding as you think they are. I really enjoyed that series, and I think if you liked that, you would like this. It's not the same by any means, because that's an urban fantasy and like superheroes, and this is not, but I do think you would appreciate the themes of this. So overall, I thought this was a very good book, and would encourage you to pick it up if you're at all interested in the story or the synopsis. Also, if you read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts on this and what you thought about it, and also if you have any recommendations based off of this book. All right, everyone, well, that is it for today's book review. Thank you for watching. Please like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and caffeinated. Bye.